We are Mike and Jeanie, and we restore old houses. In 2021, we moved to South Carolina and bought a 120-year-old Victorian house. Follow along as we put the polish back on this Victorian masterpiece. Well, there's this one here.
That's a nice one.
Yeah?
Although I don't need these drawers down here.
Okay. Let me show you another one.
Okay.
So in this book, I have a more simple, traditional chest, like that.
Oh, I like that.
You like that one?
It's not very Victorian so much, but I really like the basic, simple style.
It's very early American.
It is.
Oh, well, look who's here. Hey, guys.
Hi, welcome back to 1834 Restoration House.
Well, you caught us right in the middle of a planning session here. We had all kinds of plans today, but the weather is so cold, we can't even work upstairs. That's how cold it is, and no amount of heat seems to be able to overcome that right now.
It is 19 degrees outside in South Carolina.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's
my.
not normal for here. It's just way too cold.
No.
And these old Victorian houses in the South, they just did not have the heat for that. I mean,
Right.
they had fireplaces.
Yeah.
Not that we can use ours.
No, but we can keep the house about 65, even with the 19 degrees outside. It's able to stay at 65, but it's barely. I mean, it's like constantly running. So hopefully this cold temperature won't last too long.
Yeah, the furnace, that is, it will only run up to 65 degrees, and then it runs constantly. So
Yeah.
our heating bill is... Anyway,
Yes.
Which reminds me, we have some bills to pay, so we'll be right back after this message.
Today's program is sponsored by the generous support of our patrons. Your support helps to further our historic preservation efforts. For more information, visit patreon.com/1834 Restoration House.
I'd like to show you what we're talking about here. This is a book called Furniture in the Southern Style, and it has all kinds of drawings of traditional Southern furniture. And this one piece of furniture we're looking at right here is a blanket chest from 1816 that was found in North Carolina. And it looks like that. And so the neat thing about this book is they've actually broken it down and given measurements and made it to where you could actually reproduce these pieces of furniture in your own wood shop.
Yeah, I want to show them that too, because that is impressive. I like this book.
Yeah, that's really great. And you can buy these on Amazon.
That's where we got them.
Yeah, or any bookseller like that. Being that it's a cold day, we figured this would be a good time to start planning this, and maybe we can actually do some work on it. Well, before we build anything, we have to know what we have to build with, because one of our goals for this project is to use what we have, since we have some old boards. A lot of this stuff came from New York that we brought with us, and I'd like to try to use some of that up because it's been taking up space up here, and I think we can do something nice with it. So, like, for example, this board right here, that was part of the baseboards that we built up in our New York house.
Oh, yes.
And that was a piece left over that we didn't use. That is Eastern white pine. Now, these boards back here, these two long boards, these are also Eastern white pine. And these were left over from that project as well. So let's see what we have here. We have, it's a little over 8 inches wide. Let me just check the one underneath it and make sure it's the same. Yeah, so it's just a hair over 8 inches wide. And that looks to me maybe 10 feet long.
The top one. Oops, I lost it. There we go.
Yeah, we're just a couple of inches over 10 feet, so that's perfect. All right. And we also have some southern, I'm not sure exactly what species it is. It's cedar of some kind, but it's very aromatic, and I think that'll make a nice bottom. We have a few inches over 10 feet, so that's nice. And this one here happens to be 8 inches wide. And then I'm looking at this humongous piece of yellow pine right here. This is actually southern yellow pine.
What kind of wood was that again?
That's Eastern white pine.
Eastern white pine.
Mm-hmm. You know, the British used to use that to make ship's masts. back during the days of the British Empire.
Oh.
Yeah, before the Revolution.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, anyway.
I didn't know.
Yep. So this one here is just a bit over, actually it's just a hair under 12 inches, so it's probably, I'll call that 11 3/4 wide. And that is, by the time we get done trimming, it's 93 inches.
All right.
So that is enough to do the basic box. And then we have other pieces laying around here, like we have some red cedar here and a few other things that we can utilize. And so I think
So these are for the sides.
yes,
This is for the bottom?
top.
The top.
Uh-huh.
And this is the bottom.
Yep.
And what about legs?
Legs we'll make out of whatever we can find. We have some oak scraps, we have some more pine, and I think
Like funny with the different woods?
it'll look elegant.
Okay, sounds good.
And that'll do a lot for clearing up this pile of wood in the hallway, which I think will be a good thing.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, this is exciting.
Yep. So let's get busy and start designing. By the way, I was only kidding about paying the bills. All of the revenue that we make from this YouTube channel and Patreon actually goes to support the preservation efforts at this house and cover production costs and such things like that. So we don't pay for our heat with YouTube. So just want to make that clear. All right, now it's really good to be able to do woodworking when you're restoring an old house, because you're going to run into things like trim that's been destroyed, things that are missing, woodwork that needs to be replicated. And so being able to replicate that wood is really a good thing if you can do it. The reason that we bought this equipment in the first place is because we were living in New York and our house needed strip oak flooring, which you can't buy in that size anymore. And so we set out to buy the lumber and machine it, and we made our own flooring, and that worked out great. And now that we have this house here, it's really going to be a tremendous asset going forward. But this project here is a little bit different. In the last couple of episodes, you saw us trying to, and kind of unsuccessfully at times, build a box joint jig, which runs on the table saw here, and ultimately it worked, and I got a good box joint. In this case, we'll be building a blanket chest, and the blanket chest could be made with dovetail joints, but we're going to use box joints, which are also historically correct. And that's what this fixture is for. These are the basic dimensions then. We have 14 3/4 inch wide, 16 inches deep, and 13 7/16 inches high. Let's compare that against our wood and see if we have enough material. So we have 40 3/4 times 2. We have 16 times 2. Well, we know that that is 32, and this one's 81.5. And if we add those two together, we get 113.5 inches all the way around. Now let's take that and divide it by 12. Gives us 9.45 feet. Well, we determined that we have 10-foot boards, so we're in great shape there. The problem is they're asking for a height of 13 7/16 inch, but our boards are 8 inches. Well, that's not going to cut it. So what we'll do is we'll put the two together and we'll make it 16 inches. The chest will be a little bit higher than what they called for, but it's only by a couple of inches and it'll look just fine. It looks like we're good to go. Now all we have to do is start cutting down material and we can get busy and build something. We took the eastern white pine boards outside and cut them down to 16 inches and 40 3/4 inches respectively, and we have a pile of those. So the first thing that you do in fine woodworking is to run them through the jointer first. And the problem is this is an 8-inch jointer, and this board is actually 8 1/4 inches wide. So that won't work because the blade's not wide enough to joint the entire face of this thing. So I'm going to take it over to the table saw and whack off that extra 1/4 inch on all of the boards. This is called the jointer, and its job is to flatten one face of the board and one edge of the board. And those edges will be perfect, and it allows our other machines to work properly. And this is how it works. Well, we had a little bit of a disaster here. See this rat nest here? So I'm running the tool and everything's going great. Then all of a sudden I look over here and I realized the dust collector wasn't moving. Usually it has a kind of a cyclone action as the dust goes in and deposits. And so we shut down and opened this thing up, and this thing was absolutely clogged with this stuff. While this was clogged, it wasn't sucking the sawdust out of the jointer. So the jointer fills up with sawdust. And so we were able to get everything unplugged, cleaned up, and everything's working great now. So I've got my 4 boards that are the front and back panels. These are the side panels. So I ran each one of these through the jointer, and I flattened up the bottom, and I flattened up one edge. So now what I want to do is turn these around, and I want to run these through the table saw one time and just trim off just a whisker to make sure that this edge is completely true and flat. And we'll do that with all these boards. So now all of our boards are perfect on 2 edges and the bottom. All right, we got the planers set up. So what we're going to do is run all the boards through in sequence, and then we'll change it to cut a little bit more, and we'll run them all through again. So rather than taking one board and trying to get down to the correct thickness, we're going to run them all through one after the other. That way we can take a little bit off of each one and just keep it going and keep it going until we finally get to where we want to be. So our target thickness right now is 1 inch because we're over 1 inch. If we can get to 1 inch, that'll be really cool, because how often do you see furniture nowadays that's 1 inch thick? That's pretty cool. All right, let's get going.
begin?
Okay. Okay, my love, look at this. We've got these beautifully planed boards. They're perfect, smooth, flat, and square.
Oh, they look beautiful.
What a big difference from that rough cut lumber.
Yes.
Now,
And thick.
yeah, well, but not quite as thick as I had hoped. So I was hoping for 1 inch thick, but we had this one stubborn board right here that had too many defects in it. And by the time we got all the defects out and made it perfectly flat, we ended up being, let's see here, .864. That's good, solid, thick lumber. And I think this will make a really fine blanket chest.
I do too.
I mentioned earlier that in order to make a blanket chest that's usable, it's going to have to be probably that tall because this is too short. So what I'm going to do is take these two boards, and if you look here, this is called a rabbet profile. And so what I did is I cut this on the table saw like that, and then I did the same thing here. And when I flip them opposite and put them together like that, it gives me more gluing surface, so I get a stronger bond, and it helps to resist any kind of warping. So let me show you how I did that. When you're doing woodworking and using these machines, you really have to think carefully about the adjustments that you make and how it affects the wood. So in this case, what I did is I put the fence here, and I wanted to set how deep this rabbet is going into the board this way. And I did that by setting the fence. I have my dado stack here, and so I can make that as deep or as shallow as I want. Well, in this case, I want it shallow because the deeper it goes, the more they come together, and the shallower my box will be. So I don't want to take too much out of that. So I set a depth and I locked it. The other thing I did is I raised the blade to set this depth here. So ideally, I want to be at exactly 50% of the thickness of this board. But I don't know exactly what that is, and it's really hard to measure. So what I did is I raised it up a little bit, and then I ran two boards through, and I tested them to see if they work. And the first couple of tries, I found that they didn't work because I didn't go deep enough. So what I would do is I'd come back, raise the blade up a little more, and I just repeat that process over and over again until I get a perfect fit. And then I lock the blade setting down so it doesn't move. With everything set up, I should be able to take all my boards and run them in pairs and have perfect rabbets. So far, so good. Look at that. Time got away from us and it's already dark outside. So I'm going to take my boards and tip them up like this. And I need to go ahead and glue these up and clamp them in place. Now, the type bond glue that I'm using says to leave it clamped for at least 30 minutes, and then you can take the clamps off, which is great because then we can go glue up some more. So let's go ahead and open this up. So we'll go ahead and put that down, and then put this down, and get them all lined up really nice. About like that. And then start clamping. Okay, do you see the squeeze out there? That's what we want to see. That means that there's enough glue in the joint that is completely wetting the two pieces of wood. So I'm just going to leave that alone. I'm not going to wipe it off because then it'll get into the pores of the wood. So later on we'll take care of that. I'm going to go ahead and slide it back a little bit because these clamps need to hang over an edge. Otherwise they can cause problems. Well, here it is the next morning, and this is one of the panels we glued up last night. It's looking really good. Now it has the glue bubbles here that came out. That's not a problem because we can pop those off, and then we have to sand the whole thing anyway. So that will turn out really nice. The other one's laying on the floor. We have two more over here. These are the end panels, and they're currently being glued up right now. And while those are curing, we're going to step into the kitchen and take care of another project that we need to do. Jeanie does some pretty amazing things in the kitchen when I'm not around. A lot of canning and preservation of food and that kind of thing. So we're going to show you a little bit about that. Now this is something that I was a little bit skeptical about when I first heard about it. But did you know that you can take hamburger and preserve it in such a way that you don't need refrigeration? That's right, you don't need refrigeration. And Jeannie's going to show you how that works.
First thing we're going to do is cook it up. I want to address a few things first, and that is we are going to cook the ground beef completely before we're going to can it. The point, though, of canning it is to use a pressure canner, not a water bath. You definitely have to use the pressure canner. I'm going to be using an electric one today. It's the Presto electric canner. I got it on Amazon. I love it. I don't have to do a whole lot with it. It's great. And I don't have to do a large batch either. Makes it much easier for small batches, which is what we're going to be doing today. I've got 3 pounds of ground beef, and I'm gonna cook it up. Every pressure canner comes with a manual. In the manual, it also has recipes. And they are some wonderful recipes, actually. But do follow the recipes. You don't want to mess with botulism. You don't want to mess with any kind of a problem that can make you sick or kill your family. So follow the recipe and you will not have any problems at all. I have been doing this all of my life, so I'm still alive and it's good. I got the ground beef at Sam's Club or Costco, I'm not sure which one. But you can also get ground beef probably cheaper at your local butcher. We have to go quite a long ways to get to a butcher, but it is so worth it. We went just last week to get some. I cannot get this open, one moment. And that meat was so very good. Oh, it was worth it. And it was cheaper than the grocery store. My pot, since I'm using cast iron, needs to be heated up before I put the meat in there. And it is clicking a little bit over here, so I know it's ready. Come on. It does not want to go through. There we go. With the ground beef, we're going to cook it all up and grind it all up. I like to add seasonings to it. Whatever your favorite seasonings are is good. For basic ground beef, am just using the salt and pepper, a little bit of onion powder, and a little bit of garlic powder. Now, another thing that you can do with this to make convenient food, so to speak, I love making either spaghetti sauce out of it and then canning the spaghetti sauce. Another great thing to make is taco meat or burrito meat. You could can that up the same way that we're doing it now. So it doesn't change the recipe to add seasonings to them. Okay, we're gonna let that cook up. There are lots of different ways you can do this. You can add any kind of seasonings, you can create any kind of special sauce, just don't add flour. Flour to it usually makes it kind of pasty and yucky tasting. So you want to add your flour later if you're going to make a thick sauce of any kind, gravy of any kind. I always add either the cornstarch or the flour or whatever you want to add to it to thicken it. Do that later, after canning. While our ground beef is cooking, we need to get our jars set up and sterilized. You know, the wonderful thing about this electric canner is that it does it for us. So there's a little mark in here. And we're gonna fill it up with water to the mark. And I always put a little bit of distilled vinegar in there. We have hard water, and I don't like that white mark all the way around or cloudy jars. So putting that little bit of vinegar in there really helps. We're up to the mark. We're gonna put this over here. And then I'm going to use 6 jars because I don't know how many I need. I know I don't need 6, but I don't know if I need 4 or 5. We're just gonna use 6 just in case. I'd rather have too many than not enough. Every jar, I have to fill up halfway with water. Now that I've got them filled, I'm gonna set them in here. The great thing about this canner is that I can do 1 jar and it does it. It's wonderful. Absolutely love this thing. I'm gonna lock that down. Make sure your topper is off. Plug it in. Now, according to my book, I need to pressure can this for 75 minutes. You know, it goes to boiling water bath or a pressure can. That's the one I want. Push the button. 75 minutes. Push the button. Insert jars. It's done. So now it's going to sterilize my jars, and then it'll tell me when I can fill them. I also need to sterilize my lids. Those can't be done in the pressure canner yet. But we want to soften up that rubber ring there, and we want them to be sterilized. So we're gonna cook those just a little bit, just enough that it starts to boil just barely, and that'll be good. They're done. We'll just leave them in the water until we fill up the jars, and then we'll use them. One thing I do not like to see is having all that grease in my canned jar. I don't like it. So we're gonna get rid of as much grease as I can before I can it up. And I'm going to use some old tin foil. I shouldn't say old, but I used it the last 2 nights with supper. So we're gonna use this up, and I don't want it to leak. I'm going to put it in my pot, fill my pot up with the grease, and then I can put the grease in the freezer, and then when garbage day comes, I can take it outside. For this ground beef, I'm gonna chop it up real fine. Now you can also can meatballs if you wanted. Just make sure you cook them a little bit. Doesn't have to be a lot, but you don't want a whole lot of grease in there. You wanna cook them first. That is not much grease, but I'm glad it's out of the ground beef. I got the water getting hot, and then I'm gonna rinse it. I've got it over my big bowl so I don't lose any grease down the sink. All right. Fill jars. All righty. There we go. We're going to dump that water out. And fill our jar. We've got it packed down in there pretty good and filled with hot, clean water. I've cleaned off the rim with the paper towel. And then put our hot lid on there. Where's my mitt? There it is. Put it on hand tight and put it back in the water. And we'll get another jar and do it again. All right, still says fill the jars. We've got 4 pints in here. Put our lid on. Lock that. I still don't put the top on here. It will tell me when to put this on. It'll beep and let me know, put it on, and then I can put it on. So I really don't have to worry about it. It's wonderful. Tells you everything you need to do. It starts a 10-minute countdown once it reaches pressure. 10 minutes later, it'll tell me I need to put the valve back on. Right now, it's getting rid of all the extra air and oxygen stuff. Put regulator on. There we go. Push my button and now it starts my 75 minutes of pressure canning. When it's done, it'll let me know it's cooling down. So I don't even have to take it out. I just let it vent by itself and I'll wait. We'll see you in a little bit.
We're back in the wood shop now, and I discovered that we have not 1, not 2, but 3 errors that were made in last night's work. And so the first one here is pretty obvious. When we took the paper off the table saw, evidently the glue was able to penetrate through the paper, contacted the table saw, and the moisture that was in the glue caused flash rusting. So we don't want that. Let's fix it. So I have some Scotch-Brite, and I have some just basic 3-in-1 oil. I'll just put a little dab on there like that. And then I'm just going to rub it. I'm not really pushing very hard either. I'm just kind of going with the grain like that. And what that does is the oil will lift the rust out and bring it to the surface. The tops of these machines are precision ground, and we don't want rust getting in there and causing pitting, because that would be really bad. So if you have this kind of equipment, you got to keep an eye on it and make sure that rust does not get a foothold. If you see it forming, jump on it right away and take care of it. I have some denatured alcohol and a rag, and I'm going to go ahead and wipe that off. See how nice that is? It takes all the rust and all the oil. I like to keep a coat of Johnson's paste wax on my machines. That helps to keep them from rusting, unless you do something stupid like putting glue on it. But now that that's all done, I'm just going to go ahead and take a little bit of that, and I'm going to rub it in, being generous. I want to really get it down in there. And this will help protect it going forward. The thing is, just environmental moisture alone can cause these surfaces to rust. And so it's a good idea every once in a while just to go ahead and clean them really good and then re-wax them. Just consider it a maintenance item. I gave the wax a few minutes to dry. Then I just come back with the cloth and just buff it out a little bit, and that leaves a nice thin coat. This has a side benefit of making your wood glide across the surface a little bit smoother. There, good as new. And now for mistake number 2. I cut this rabbet joint yesterday, and I did it so perfectly that the wood was absolutely flush when I put it together. The problem is, when I put the glue in the joint, that glue has a minute amount of thickness to it, and what it did is it caused the 2 boards to move up like this. Let me illustrate on the whiteboard. So we have a piece of wood here like that, and then we have another piece of wood like this. And these 2 are supposed to fit together really nice. But what happened was it looked like this. I'm just exaggerating a little bit here. But you see the offset there, and that offset is caused because the glue gets stuck in this pocket right here and causes the 2 to shift. So I think going forward, any rabbet joints I make will be a little bit loose right down the middle here, and that'll give us a place for the glue to kind of fall into, kind of a pocket, so to speak. So what we'll end up with in the future is something like this, where both sides are flat, top and bottom, and there'll be a little bit of a gap here in the middle, and that way the glue can sit in there and not cause any problems. But how do we solve the immediate problem of what we have today? Well, it's simple. It's very close. I mean, it's like a whisker away from being perfect. So when we go through sanding, which we're going to do, we'll start with a coarse sand and then a finer sand, and that will tend to take some of that out, and at the end of the day, you'll never even see it. Well, now it's time for mistake number 3. Can you see it? So here we have our box joint jig. That's the index pin. The very first cut is up against that index, and as you can see, that board is not going to fit in there. If it was a smaller board, yes it would, but it lands up against here, and that's a problem. Likewise, as I come across here and start indexing, I run out of room and I can't go all the way down. That's a problem. So how do I fix that? I'm going to have to make a cut here and a cut here and make room so that this thing can slide back and forth. Now I know that that's going to sacrifice the structural integrity of this box, but this is what we did. We're kind of stuck with it now. But I think down the road I'm going to build another version of this which is bigger. It'll just be longer this way so we can do bigger pieces. Well, you live and learn, and we try to keep it real here at 1834. Well, what's the best way to do that? There's all kinds of ways that I can cut that material out of there, but I'm thinking I have a dado blade right here. So all I need to do is run this thing through the table saw like that, and I can cut that excess material out if I'm super careful. So that's what I'm going to do. All right, now that we got that fixed, I can run my boards through here like that without any problem. Okay, there's a couple things going on here I need to talk about. So I did a lot of thinking and modeling and calculating to try to figure out how this works, because when you do your box joints, you have to flip these around and basically alternate. And so what I was able to figure out is that the first board that goes through, the part that faces this way is going to be on the inside of your assembled box. The next board that goes through will be the outside of your assembled box. And then it comes back to the inside, then back to the outside. And that's an important distinction, because otherwise you're going to have a problem if you're not careful when you get around your box. that last joint there may not fit. So it's really important to keep that in mind. And let's see, the other thing too is, since I can't fit this board in this sled because it's too big, I had to measure the thickness of this. I had to measure the thickness of the base, add the two together, and then upsize it slightly. And that's how high we raised the saw blade to. I know it's technical, it's a lot of stuff going on, but I think we're going to be okay. Well, there's a lot of work that we did off camera just because it was dangerous and we didn't want any distractions. And this is kind of how things went together. Now, we had a chance to mess this up really big, right? So we were super duper careful about our calculations and keeping track of which corner was which and how the fingers went together. And it looks to me like it's going to work.
Yes, it does. I am so excited.
Yeah.
I really am. Our first piece of furniture. I've been waiting a long time for this.
She really has. I think we started talking about this, way back in New York, I think?
Yeah, the beginning.
Yeah, but you know, life gets in the way sometimes and other things take priority.
It does, yeah.
But it just seemed like the right time to do this now.
Well, I'm excited.
So anyway, what's left to do here is we have to knock it together, of course, but before we do that, we have to do some more machining because we want to be able to put the bottom in here. And I'd like the bottom to not just be nailed in or screwed in, but I'd like to have actual wood joints, probably rabbets or tongues and grooves or something like that. So we'll have to take this apart, figure out what to do, and then we have to cut the bottom pieces and put that in.
Ooh-wee.
Yeah.
The blanket chest coming together so quickly is very exciting. I cannot wait for it to be finished. It feels like it's almost halfway done already, but we'll see. The canner is done. Now it beeped at me 10 times and it says done. Now this may have been done for about an hour or so, and it's okay. I can leave it there overnight if I wanted to. It's not gonna hurt it any. It depressurizes it and brings it back to a normal temperature. All canned up. The joy of the electric canner versus the canner that I have on the stovetop is that I only have to do 1 or 2 jars and it's okay. Whereas the big one on the stovetop you really want to fill it with more because it'll take a really long time to come up to pressure with only a few jars in it. This one doesn't. It takes the same amount of time. It is fantastic. Absolutely love it. So pressure canning meats really is that easy. You cook it up, you put it in your hot sterilized jars, and you run it. And you're done. It really is that easy. When your jars cool the next day, clean off the tops, take your rings off, always take the rings off, and then label them and put them in a cool, dark place and use them up. I like to use mine within the year. I like fresh food every year. So, well, actually ours doesn't last more than 6 months. But it's really nice to have canned meat already. I know there's nothing strange in it. It came from excellent quality meat, and I can use it for whatever I want. I heat it up, add some more seasonings if I want, or put it into a spaghetti sauce or whatever. And it's very convenient. Absolutely love doing these. Another thing, don't stack your jars when they're filled. When you stack them, if the lid pops a little, it'll seal back up again. You don't want that. If it pops, it's bad. Don't eat it. So have fun canning meat. We got the drapes done. Don't they look fantastic? I love it. I think it makes the room look bigger, but warmer. The ceilings really are 10 feet tall, so they are pretty tall already. Next week, we are gonna go ahead and get the room finished, hopefully, set it all up and get a whole bed set in here. So that'll be in next week's episode. I think this week's episode went pretty good.
I have to agree. We got a lot done.
We did.
We did some pretty scary things, but we got through it, and nobody lost fingers and nothing got broken.
Thankfully, yes.
Thankfully. But it's so exciting to see that box come together because this is something I've wanted to do for her for so long,
Yes.
and I just never had the time. And now we got the time, we had the materials, and it just seemed like the right time to do it.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Well, we're going to cut off this episode for this week, and we will see you next time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching 1834 Restoration House. Please like, share, and subscribe.